Hey there YouTube! Today I want to talk about a piece called the Chant funèbre by the Russian composer Igor Stravinsky. It just received its second ever performance 4 days ago on December 2nd, 2016, in spite of the fact that it was composed in the year 1908. This is a piece that was lost to the world for over 100 years, and it was composed in response to the death of Stravinsky's teacher, Rimsky-Korsakov. Now, I've been listening to this piece a lot, and I have to say that I have come to like this piece more and more every single time that I've listened to it. I think that what a lot of us in the musical world were expecting was a sort of rough draft for the Firebird. And indeed, this piece does share a lot of similarities with the Firebird, the ballet that Stravinsky started composing just a year later. But it's also its own thing, and it has a lot of influences not only from Rimsky-Korsakov, but from Mussorgsky and Wagner and Borodin. But that's not to say that it's not Stravinsky. There are a lot of hallmarks of his own style of orchestration and harmonization and melody. But let's start at the beginning, and the beginning does share a lot of DNA with the Firebird. The opening of this work is for the basses playing sort of murmurando, just a barely audible murmuring. And then there's a big chord, and the bassoons play a little melodic riff. Now that is almost the exact way that the Firebird begins. So after this sort of low, murmuring, creepy introduction, which grows in intensity, there's a solo line for the French horn. Now this melody is interesting because it is modal. It's literally the white keys on the piano. There are no chromatic notes, none of the black keys. However, this first theme is made up not only of that melody, but there's also a little counter melody. Which is the opposite. It is chromatic, alternating black and white keys on the piano keyboard. Now that chromatic melody, which starts as just a sort of little counter melody response, then goes on to suffuse the entire texture of the piece, while the main melody is repeated. So, like the introduction, this section, based around the main melody and that little counter motive, builds up orchestrationally phrase by phrase by phrase. And the biggest version of this, the kind of climax of this second section of the piece, is very reminiscent of music by Richard Wagner. It's even reminiscent of The Ride of the Valkyries. Now, once we've got the main theme in our heads, Stravinsky develops it further. And one of the things that he said later in life was that he wanted to represent each instrument of the orchestra laying a wreath on Rimsky-Korsakov's grave. So here Stravinsky is giving us individual woodwind colors. The bassoon plays the theme, then the clarinet, then the English horn, the flute, the oboe. Then there is this really amazing section with the kind of wave-like figurations in the strings. Now when we think of that, we have to think of two composers mainly, there's Debussy in La Mer, and there's Rimsky-Korsakov himself, who wrote a lot of waves in Scheherazade. But Stravinsky's treatment of these wave-like figures and what's going on top of it and the harmonies that suffuse it is really unique. I mean, it makes me think of like maybe Prokofiev or Scriabin, but I think that it's really Stravinsky exercising his own personal voice at this point. The piece then moves into its final section, which starts with the cellos and basses playing alone. And now this little chromatic noodle becomes the main focus of the music. And here, I think we have a definite homage, once again, to Richard Wagner. And it's no surprise that the piece that Stravinsky uses as his model here is Siegfried's funeral music from the fourth opera in Wagner's Ring cycle, Götterdämmerung. But what's interesting is that at the climax of this little section, I think Stravinsky brings in music from another composer, namely Modest Mussorgsky. There are big chords with strings playing tremolo and the full orchestra, and then they drop down to very soft chords in the brass. Now, what this music reminds me more of than anything is the catacomb movement from Mussorgsky's Pictures at an Exhibition. Mussorgsky composed his piece for piano solo, and the version that we are most familiar with today was orchestrated by Maurice Ravel in 1922, so well after Stravinsky wrote this piece. However, Stravinsky could have heard an earlier orchestration by Tushmalov that was done in the 1880s. So the only part of this piece that doesn't quite work for me is, in fact, the ending. Now, this was Stravinsky's Opus 5, which low opus number means an early work, and if you want to learn more about that, I have a video on that. And so it's not surprising that for a composer writing his Opus 5, that the ending is somehow unsatisfying. Composing the ending of a piece of music is one of the greatest challenges of writing music. Now, a few other interesting things about this piece. The music itself was discovered in an unused room that was just filled with old library material in the basement of the St. Petersburg Conservatory. The intellectual property of the music itself belongs to the Stravinsky family, whereas the orchestral parts that were found, the actual physical copies, belong to the St. Petersburg Conservatory, and by extension to the Russian government because they run the conservatory. Okay, the final thing that I will say about the premiere of this work. Take a close look at what's going on behind Valery Gergiev. Who are these people? Who would start talking a minute into the world re-premiere of a work by the most important composer of the 20th century? And what is that guy wearing? Is he wearing a t-shirt? Let me just say, if I had been there, you think that there was a scandal at the premiere of The Rite of Spring? And yes, there was, and I made a video about it. Anyway, nobody who was there deserved to be. But there's good news for the rest of us, which is that the piece is going to receive several national premieres. It's going to be premiered in the UK in, I think, March of 2017, and the United States by the Chicago Symphony in April of 2017. But anyway, that is The Funeral Song by Igor Stravinsky. It's really a very interesting early work by Stravinsky, and if you're interested in more of these pre-Firebird pieces, I would definitely recommend listening to Fireworks and the Scherzo Fantastique. Okay, YouTube, that is it for this little vlog on Stravinsky's Chant funèbre. I also host a show on this channel called Ask a Maestro, where I answer a lot of questions about the history and society and culture of classical music, so feel free to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content like that. Thanks for watching, and goodbye, everyone.